The Panthers hit an oil slick, and the Stanley Cup Final is tied at 2 games apiece. Welcome to NHL Wraparound Stanley Cupdate for Friday the 13th of June, 2025. Vic and Neil heading into the weekend. Great theater, which I don't think anybody could see coming on Thursday evening.
Friday the 13th came early for the Panthers. That was scary last night to have a 3-0 lead after the first period and end up in the game.
One of the things I've found stunning is that in 3 of the first 4 games of this series, we have seen dominance on one side, adjustments made, and then a complete about-face in the second period. And that's what we saw again on Thursday.
Yeah, we did. And shockingly, too, because of the way Paul Maurice's team usually can carry leads right through a game. And I'm talking playoffs. I'm not talking regular season. But doesn't this remind you of last year when it was 3-0 in games and the Edmonton Oilers came roaring back?
I think that the Oilers get more and more confident that they were able to do things last night. And you saw that first period, that there was no room through center ice. They weren't winning board battles. Florida was pinning them in at will. And then they were able to overcome that. And that's something that will make them that much more dangerous for the rest of the series. Not saying that they're going to win it, but certainly that they have been able to execute certain things in situations that you couldn't foresee. That says a lot about the resiliency of that club.
Absolutely, but it also maybe does it say that Florida, when Edmonton started to come back, they started tightening up and squeezing their sticks too tight.
Which is surprising because it's not like these two teams are unfamiliar with each other going back a year. And for a Paul Maurice team to literally seize up the way they did in the second period was somewhat shocking to me. I did think, by the way, and we're going a little bit ahead here, I thought Florida did have the edge in the overtime before Leon Draisaitl's goal. But still, that's a situation they never should have been in the first place.
No, they shouldn't have been. And think about it. Florida could have this series done and over. Let's proceed.
Are they headed to Game 5 or Game 6, actually? Because the two clubs have already played a shade under 59 minutes of overtime in this series. And you're going to wonder, how is this going to weigh on the clubs as this series goes to at least a Game 6, maybe even a Game 7?
My prediction is that this series will go at least 6 games.
Smith math. Here we go. Let's first go to the personnel changes heading into this game. Jeff Skinner in, first game since May 29th. Troy Stecher in on defense. Victor Arvidsson and John Klingberg are out. So a couple of moves made by Chris Knobloch heading in. And Oilers had a really good first shift. They got a shot at like the 8-second mark. And then after that, all Panthers.
Of course, you know who that shot was by? None other than Connor McDavid, who was literally flying right from the opening faceoff.
One of the things that we were looking to see was the Oilers' discipline. And, of course, I had said that Game 3 was not a good optic for the NHL with all the shenanigans and the extracurriculars that went on, and that hopefully this was out of the system of both teams, particularly Edmonton, that was clearly frustrated by the way the Panthers were playing. And that was gone. There was no nonsense last night. But at the same time, discipline has different forms. And in this one, the Oilers wind up taking 3 minor penalties in the first period. The first one by Evander Kane. He's had 4 first-period penalties in games 2, 3, and 4. It's a high stick. That's followed by a tripping penalty by Darnell Nurse. It's a 2-man advantage for the Panthers. Face-off win by Barkov. Goal by Matthew Tkachuk. It's 1-0. And Game 4 is starting to evolve. It's getting that same feeling of Game 3.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, at some point, I turned to my friend and said, this could be another blowout with the way Edmonton was playing, taking penalties, and then the way that the Panthers were capitalizing. Yeah, it did not look good for the Oilers.
Matthias Ekholm takes the third of those penalties. Offensive zone high stick. Tkachuk buries a rebound of a Reinhart shot, and it's a second assist for Alex Barkov, who was pointless in the first 3 games of the series. And this Panthers power play, which we had spoken about in our finals preview, is absolutely shredding the Oilers at this point. The discipline in terms of the penalties, where they're taken, the types of infractions, a lot of self-inflicted wounds by the Oilers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not over yet.
On the third goal, Troy Stecher is hit by Verhaeghe, and puck is centered. Anton Lundell scores the goal. Stecher is actually injured on the play. We'll get into that in a second. But I also have to think that even though I believe those 3 penalties that the Oilers took were warranted, it was a high stick by Verhaeghe that wasn't called. And there was also a high stick against Jake Wallman. He was on the receiving end earlier in the period. So I don't think that the Oilers were too pleased with the officiating at that point either. And now they're down 3-0.
Stecher clearly did get hit in the helmet by the stick of Verhaeghe. What was interesting was by the time the puck went into the net by Lundell, Stecher was holding his face, and the stick didn't hit his face. So I don't know whether he was trying to draw a penalty there or what, but he was not hurt from Verhaeghe's stick.
Well, he was hurt from something because he played one brief shift in the second period and only ended up with a total ice time of 4:18, a shortening of the bench, and the 5 remaining Oilers defensemen were outstanding the rest of the night.
They were excellent, and kudos to them for going with 5 defensemen. That's tough because you're not out with your same partner every time and playing very solidly defensively.
First period, Panthers had a 17-7 edge in shots, 34-15 in attempts, completely indicative of what was going on. After the game, Leon Draisaitl had said how Corey Perry spoke up in the locker room between periods. And sometimes it can't always be the same voices. The Connor McDavid, who is the captain of the club. But as the elder statesman, 40 years old, Perry got up, said what he had to say, and this game flips. And now Calvin Pickard is in the net replacing Stu Skinner for Edmonton in the Oilers' goal.
Yeah, which wasn't a surprise to me anyway, that number 74 was out and number 30 was in the net for the Oilers. One change seemed to really shake the team.
Almost immediately, because Sergei Bobrovsky had to stop Jeff Skinner one-on-one just a little over a minute into the period. And then Evan Bouchard missed the net in all alone a couple of minutes later. And then finally, the Oilers get their first power play, and it's Ryan Nugent-Hopkins converting from Draisaitl and McDavid at 3:33. High blocker, almost over Bobrovsky's head, actually. And the Oilers are on the board, and there's some hope.
Yeah, and when you see those 3 clicking, it's there's trouble brewing for Florida. And what was important was who was going to get the next goal. Were you going to be able to stem the tide that Edmonton was building here?
Florida had the next great chance. And if there is a clear turning point in this game, besides the fact that the Oilers are playing better at the start of the second period, it's Pickard on Anton Lundell. That came off a Jake Wallman turnover at the 11:26 mark. And then a minute and 21 seconds later, it's Darnell Nurse taking a pass from Ekholm. This is after the Oilers win a 50-50 battle along the far boards. Nurse goes high blocker. Now it's 3-2.
And now things are really tightening up within the arena for the Panthers and their fans, because what looked very, very comfortable when they headed into the intermission now was very uncomfortable.
Another Oilers power play. Bobrovsky has to make two big saves on both Draisaitl and McDavid. But soon after that power play, at the 15:05 mark, Podkolzin outmuscles Mikkola in front. Good work down low by Darnell Nurse coming down the boards after a face-off win by Draisaitl. This comes just 7 seconds after the commercial break, and the game is even. And again, what we're seeing here are things in Edmonton's game that are the signatures of the Panthers game. Winning 50-50 battles, good board work, outmuscling in front, getting position, and again, complete about face from the first period.
Yes, it was. However, Ekholm and Nugent Hopkins combined to become the goaltender for the Oilers with 1:15 left, when it looked for sure like Matthew Tkachuk was going to complete a hat trick.
Yep.
And those guys blocked the shot. Had that puck gone in the net with 1:15 to go, I don't know that the Oilers would have been able to complete a comeback that they eventually do.
As it was, period ends. Oilers 17-10 in shots for the second, 30-15 in attempts. Complete reversal from the first. We head to the third period, and it's Pickard making a stop off Barkov, deflection early in the third, and then Bobrovsky had to stop Corey Perry on a power play, then a good right pad save on Podkolzin. Finally, great pressure by the Oilers. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, he is outmanned 1-on-4 behind the Panthers' net. Eventually, Alex Barkov turns the puck over, and it's Kapanen to Wallman. With 6:24 left, somehow the Oilers are in front in this game.
I got to tell you, as great as Sasha Barkov is as a defensive forward and a disciplined forward and a great captain for the Panthers, he is not producing the way he should during this series. Has he been good on McDavid? Yes. No goals. Gets his first 2 assists in Game 4, first 2 points of the series. And then this happens later on in the third period. The good news for the Florida Panthers is there's a lot of upside to Barkov's game. The Oilers are getting more out of more people than the Panthers are. The Panthers are not getting it out of their entire lineup, I don't think, the way that the Oilers are.
To your point, on this play, even though he did not make the score sheet, credit Matthias Janmark for the pressure on Barkov that forced that turnover. Now, we had spoken earlier in the second period, the save that Pickard made on Lundell, which would have made the score 4-1 at that time. Don't forget that with 3:25 left, Bobrovsky had to stop Draisaitl in close to keep that a 4-3 game that enabled Panthers to pull their goalie down only 1 goal. They tie it off kind of a broken play. And I wonder what your take was on this, because Pickard did not get what he wanted to on that clear around the boards. Kulak tried to force it up the boards as well. The commentary from the studio group with TNT was that he probably should have tried to have eaten the puck. Was not able to clear. Good board work by the Panthers. Bennett and Tkachuk strong in front, and it's Reinhart tying the game with 19.5 seconds left in regulation.
And a huge goal for the Florida Panthers, and it looks like they're okay at this point because they've tied it up, obviously, and they're going to get a chance now to win it in overtime.
It's Carter Verhaeghe's hard work that gets that puck into the slot, and puck eventually finds its way over to Reinhart, who ties the game. It becomes the 100th overtime in Stanley Cup Finals history, and both teams got iron. Early in the overtime, Trent Frederick for the Oilers, then Sam Bennett, who hit Calvin Pickard, and then went off the crossbar just before the 7-minute mark. And like I said, I thought that the Panthers had a slight edge in the play, but in overtime, it really doesn't matter. It matters who gets the last break. Leon Draisaitl, his 4th overtime winner In 2025, it's a one-handed shot that deflects in off Mikkola and past Bobrovsky. And in a game that the Oilers had no business being in at the start of the second period, they now have home ice advantage in this series.
Yes, they got it back again. And now, as we have said, it's a 2 out of 3, 2 of the games in Edmonton, and a ton of travel. Because think about it. Today, both teams are traveling all the way up to Edmonton, 5.5-hour flight with a headwind. They will play the game tomorrow night, jump back on the plane, and come back to Florida. That is for certain. It's a lot of travel. And think about it, Vic, the amount of people that are traveling back and forth. It's not just the two hockey teams. There's a ton of media traveling. There's a ton of NHL personnel traveling. I mean, NHL charters a jet to take everybody back and forth. And they don't charter a little executive jet. They charter an airline.
I did a handful of them. And by the time you get between games 5 and 6, it's attrition to fight it, to get to the end.
I think you might have too, but I did the Calgary-Tampa series.
Yeah, I did it. Yeah.
Went back and forth on the NHL plane because I was doing NHL radio. And yeah, those were long days. Just thinking about Calgary, Alberta, Edmonton, Alberta, Tampa Bay, Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Very similar.
Very similar.
Yeah. But by the way, we flew commercial.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. So
okay. So you had to change. You had stops and all that.
Yeah.
See, I don't. I was on a charter.
Yeah. Well,
eating good food and enjoying myself, putting my feet up.
Yeah. And us paying with the corporate credit card to get our snacks. So there you go. Big difference. Just to put a final stat on this, and I think folks may have heard this on Thursday, teams that were leading by at least 3 goals after the first period in finals history with 37-0 prior to last night. So not only, like you said at the start, have the Panthers surrendered leads that they never surrender, they made history last night, and they're on the wrong side of it.
And the Oilers made history on the right side of it. Now, let me ask you this. Who starts in goal for the Oilers in Edmonton tomorrow night? Do they go back to Skinner again? Or do they reward, I say reward, that's a bad word to use, but do they give the net to Pickard now because of his play last night, like they did when he came in and saved the day with the LA Kings?
I think you have an argument both ways here. And before we recorded, I actually went back and listened to part of our finals preview that we did with Craig Button. And you had asked the question of us of whether or not Skinner would play the entire series. And I asked you, is it a start or does he come in at some point during the game? You said, no. Does he start every game? And I think, like I said, you can make the argument both ways. You could say, okay, we're going to go back to Skinner, and if he struggles, then we go back to Pickard again and perhaps ride him out the rest of the series. And, of course, the other side of this is they won with Pickard. He stopped 22 of 23 shots. Maybe this is his net again. So I think it's going to be a fascinating decision that Chris Knobloch makes. And either way, Oilers have the momentum coming back home with home ice advantage. But as we've also said, momentum is as good as the first 6 letters.
So what's your prediction? Who starts in net?
It doesn't matter. I'm going to be wrong.
Well, that's fine. I want to hear you be wrong.
I'm going to say Skinner because that's what I said on the show. So I've got to stick with that.
Okay. I'm saying it's going to be Calvin Pickard. And I was right about Skinner starting yesterday. And I want to see if I'm right that Calvin Pickard starts in Edmonton.
You called Jack Michaels, didn't you?
No, I didn't. I wouldn't cheat. You think I'd ever cheat?
Oh, no, not ever. Not ever. Game 5, Saturday, 8 o'clock on TNT. The 6th game will be played on Tuesday, and if there is a Game 7, it will be a week from today, June 20th. Some news around the NHL 3 awards given out on Thursday. The Hart, Vezina, and Lady Byng. And the Hart and Vezina go to the same person, Connor Hellebuck. He beats out Leon Draisaitl and Nikita Kucherov for MVP. And Darcy Kemper and Andrei Vasilevsky for the Vezina. He becomes the 5th goalie to win the Vezina and Hart in the same season, following Carey Price, Jose Theodore, Dominic Hasek, and Jacques Plante. Thoughts there?
Dominic Hasek did it twice and did it in consecutive years.
Yep.
And both years that he did it, 97 and 98, the Stanley Cup champion was the Detroit Red Wings.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, he would go on himself to win a Stanley Cup with those very Detroit Red Wings.
In 2002.
Correct.
Lady Byng Trophy goes to Anze Kopitar of the LA Kings. He wins this for the 3rd time, beating out Jack Eichel and Braden Point. He was 2nd on the Kings in scoring this season with 67 points and only 4 penalty minutes.
Which is hard to accomplish. The way they call penalties now, I mean, you can sneeze and get a penalty in the NHL.
And the speculated trade that we had spoken about a couple of days back, Chris Kreider is now an Anaheim Duck. He goes to Anaheim along with a 2025 4th-round pick for Carey Terrence and a 2025 3rd-round pick. The Ducks are retaining the balance of Kreider's contract, 2 years, $6.5 AAV. Kreider had waived his 15-team no-trade clause, which Anaheim was a part of, and he joins former Rangers Jacob Trouba, Ryan Strome, and Frank Vetrano on the West Coast. So what's your take here? Because to me, this seems almost like somewhat of a clerical move by Chris Drury to free up cap space, but I'm a little bit dubious on the return for New York here.
I don't know the young player. I know he was a captain of his junior team, but I don't know. I've never seen him play, so I don't know. It looks like a giveaway to me. Anaheim's willing to take the salary and willing to take Chris Kreider. The whole thing doesn't feel good to me. I mean, having been living in the New York area and watching Chris Kreider's career and watching the Rangers, and I mean, Trouba's gone, Kreider's gone, Zibanejad, is he next? I mean, who's next? Lindgren's gone. I mean, this team is torn down, and it's 1 year out from winning the President's Trophy, and they're torn down, and they're not a shell of what they were when they won the President's Trophy. So I don't know. I hope Chris Kreider enjoys his time with the Ducks and is successful. I think he's a good person. I've heard that from everybody that knows him. And I will tell you that now in Anaheim, when he goes into the bar and buys somebody else a drink, he can say to the waiter, "Just put it on my bill."
Boy, how things have changed for Kreider also when he had that 3rd period hat trick in the conference semifinal against Carolina just last May. And now he is an Anaheim Duck. And I think it also speaks to somewhat of the cerebral way that Drury has done business also, with this very cold and calculated. And it started with Goudreau and then Trouba, and then the memo goes out and Kreider's name is on it and he gets scratched. And the entire piece of the way business is being done in New York just has this kind of sour taste in it. And you being in that position, albeit 3 decades ago, I don't think that's the way that you wanted people to perceive how you conducted your business at MSG.
I was there 3 decades ago, but I was also there 25 years ago. And that's never the way I did business. I will say on Drury's behalf that he did meet with Kreider at the exit meetings and tell him, this is what I'm going to do. He told Kreider he didn't just spring this on him. So I will give him credit for doing that, which is not what he did with the aforementioned Goudreau and Trouba. But it still is, if I'm a Ranger fan, particularly those thousands that have bought number 20 jerseys, because Kreider's a popular figure with the Ranger fans. I mean,
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Now he's a popular figure that will just waddle around in Anaheim.
Yeah. Well, not the way he skates, though. There'll be no waddling.
He doesn't waddle.
To speak more about the Ducks' acquisition of Chris Kreider, we're going to have Anaheim GM Pat Verbeek joining us on NHL Wraparound on Monday.
It's time for This Day in Stanley Cup History.
We have spoken about Andrei Kopitar and Chris Kreider within this show. And on this date in 2014, they played in the game we're going to mention because the LA Kings won their second Stanley Cup in double overtime in Game 5 of their series against the New York Rangers on a goal by Alec Martinez. He beats Henrik Lundqvist on the rebound of a Tyler Toffoli shot. Martinez also scored the game winner in overtime in Game 7 against Chicago to get the Kings into that final. And just a little footnote on that, Chris Kreider did score in that game for the Rangers. He had the first of their 2 goals that night. Justin Williams scored the first goal of the game for the Kings. He won the Conn Smythe Trophy, 9 goals, 25 points, and 26 games. And in 2002, it's Scotty Bowman's final game as head coach. The Red Wings defeat the Hurricanes 3-1. Brendan Shanahan with a pair of goals. Nick Lidstrom wins the Conn Smythe. And for Bowman, his 9th Stanley Cup as a head coach. But what made this one special was that after the clincher, Bowman mentioned to the equipment manager that he wanted his skates. He put the skates on, and he actually raised the cup, skating around with the trophy over his head. And during the handshake line prior to that, I believe he spoke with Aaron Ward and said that he was retiring. And that was kind of the first tip-off on the open mic that we heard that this was his last game as head coach.
And we mentioned earlier that the goaltender for the Red Wings was that Dominik Hasek, who we mentioned twice, 1997 and 1998, won both MVP and the Vezina in the same year.
We're always able to make these connections.
Yes.
A reminder that Stanley Cupdate will return on Saturday and Sunday, previewing and reviewing Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final between the Oilers and Panthers. And once again, NHL Wraparound returns on Monday. We'll be joined with Anaheim Ducks General Manager Pat Verbeek. We'll speak to you Saturday.